Cottage cheese is having a moment right now. Social media influencers are blending it into smoothies, spreading it on toast, even turning it into ice cream. Sales are surging, and the dairy aisle has never looked so crowded with options. But here is what those viral recipe videos will not tell you. Some of the most popular cottage cheese brands in America are loaded with additives that have been banned across the European Union, contaminated with foreign objects during production, and hit with recalls so large they affected millions of containers. And because cottage cheese has this wholesome, old-fashioned reputation, most consumers never think to flip the tub over and actually read what is inside. That ends today. We investigated the biggest cottage cheese brands sold in the United States, dug into their recall histories, their ingredient lists, and the scientific research behind what they are putting in your food. What we found should concern anyone who has been trusting these companies with their health. So before you scoop another spoonful, you need to hear this countdown. Here are 5 US cottage cheese brands you must avoid. Number 5, Amazon Fresh. When you think of Amazon, you probably think of 2-day shipping and smart speakers. You probably do not think of cottage cheese, but the retail giant has been quietly building a massive private label grocery empire. And its low-fat, small curd cottage cheese is sitting in refrigerators across the country. The problem is what is sitting inside that container alongside the curds. A single half-cup serving delivers 460 milligrams of sodium. To put that in perspective, that is 20% of the daily limit the federal government recommends for the average adult, and nearly a third of what the American Heart Association suggests for anyone managing high blood pressure, and roughly 120 million American adults have high blood pressure according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That means nearly half the adult population should be watching their sodium intake, and one serving of this cottage cheese eats up a significant chunk of their daily allowance. But it is not just the salt. The ingredient list reads more like a chemistry experiment than a dairy product. You will find xanthan gum and guar gum listed as thickeners. Additives, the Cornucopia Institute's cottage cheese investigation, identified as unnecessary fillers that have no place in what should be a simple food. The Environmental Working Group gave this product a moderate processing concern rating, flagging the use of mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, which studies have shown can contribute small amounts of artificial trans fats to your diet. Even a little trans fat adds up when you're eating this product regularly. Amazon can ship a package to your door in hours, but they cannot seem to make a cottage cheese with a clean ingredient list. Number 4, Westby. Westby Cooperative Creamery has been making dairy products in Wisconsin for decades, and their cottage cheese has a loyal following in the Midwest. But loyalty does not mean safety. In 2016, Westby was forced to recall thousands of tubs of cottage cheese sold under 4 different brand names after the company discovered the product may not have been properly pasteurized. That is not a minor labeling error or a packaging hiccup. Improper pasteurization means potentially dangerous bacteria could survive in a product that consumers expect to be safe. The recall affected stores across Wisconsin, and the fact that the cottage cheese was sold under multiple labels made it even harder for shoppers to track down. And even when the production process works as intended, the product itself raises questions. Westby's low-fat cottage cheese contains 450 milligrams of sodium per serving. But here is what really caught our attention. The ingredient list includes carrageenan, a thickener, extracted from red seaweed that has become one of the most controversial food additives in America. A study published in the journal Cancer Research found that carrageenan intake in rats led to a higher rate of colon tumors. A separate review in the journal Carbohydrate Polymers documented carrageenan's ability to cause colon inflammation, a condition linked to abdominal pain, weight loss, and chronic fatigue. The Cleveland Clinic warns that colitis symptoms should prompt immediate medical attention. Now, carrageenan is typically added to low-fat cottage cheese to replace the creamy texture lost when fat is reduced. But here is the question consumers should be asking. If dozens of other brands can make cottage cheese without it, why is Westby still using it? Number 3, Borden. You probably recognize Elsie the cow that cheerful mascot that has been smiling at you from dairy cases since 1856. But behind that friendly face is an ingredient list that would make a food scientist WS. Borden's large curd cottage cheese delivers 450 milligrams of sodium in a half-cup serving. But sodium is just the beginning of the problems here. The ingredient list includes cornstarch as a thickener, multiple phosphate compounds, including potassium phosphate and calcium sulfate, and the preservative potassium sorbate. These are all additives that serve the manufacturer's shelf life goals, not your nutritional needs. Then there's the one ingredient that sets Borden apart from most of its competitors, and not in a good way. Borden's cottage cheese contains titanium dioxide, a whitening agent used to make the product appear brighter and more visually appealing. And 2021, the European Food Safety Authority, completed an exhaustive review of titanium dioxide as a food additive and concluded it can no longer be considered safe. The panel found that genotoxicity, meaning potential DNA damage, could not be ruled out after consumption of titanium dioxide particles. The European Commission banned titanium dioxide in food across the entire EU in 2022. The FDA's position is that titanium dioxide is still generally recognized as safe, but here is the detail most Americans do not know. The last time the FDA reviewed the safety of this additive was 1973. That is over 50 years ago. The science has advanced enormously since then, but the FDA's classification has not. In 2023, California even proposed banning titanium dioxide, along with several other additives, though the provision was ultimately removed from the final legislation. So, Borden is putting a substance in your cottage, cheese purely for cosmetic purposes, one that Europe banned after finding it may damage your DNA, and the American agency responsible for your food safety has not seriously examined it in over half a century. Number 2, Kemp's. Kemp's is owned by Dairy Farmers of America, one of the largest dairy cooperatives in the country. Their cottage cheese products are a staple across the Midwest, with bright packaging and even cartoon-themed varieties marketed directly at children. But a closer look at what is inside should give any parent pause. A half-cup serving of Kemp's 4% milk-fat cottage cheese contains 470 milligrams of sodium, one of the highest counts in the entire category. The ingredient list includes guar gum, carrageenan, potassium sorbate as a preservative, and something you do not see in most cottage cheese brands: polyorbate 80. Polyorbate 80 is an emulsifier used to improve texture, but the science emerging around this additive is alarming. A landmark 2015 study published in the journal Nature found that polyorbate 80 profoundly impacted the intestinal microbiota in mice, promoting gut inflammation and associated disease states. Research published in the journal POS Medicine in 2024 found that higher intakes of certain emulsifiers were associated with higher risks of cancer. A separate study in the BHMJ in 2023 linked emulsifier intake to increased risk of cardiovascular disease in a study following over 95,000 adults. The International Organization for the Study of Inflammatory Bowel Diseases issued guidance back in 2020 advising that patients with those conditions should consider limiting their intake of polyorbate 80 along with carrageenan, carboxymethyl cellulose, and maltodextrin. And Kemp's has problems beyond ingredients. In 2024, the company's parent organization, Dairy Farmers of America, was sued by Old Home Foods after the Lamars, Iowa production facility, where Kemp's produced cottage cheese for Old Home, attempted to terminate production early, threatening to put Old Home Foods out of business entirely. The lawsuit alleged breach of contract and was settled after a 7-hour, 40-minute hearing. The settlement terms remained confidential. When a company's own business partners have to sue to keep production going, it raises serious questions about priorities. Number 1, Breakstones. Breakstones is one of the most recognized cottage cheese names in America, particularly across the East Coast and Southeast. But what most consumers do not realize is that the brand has been owned by Kraft Heinz for years, and its track record under that corporate umbrella has been deeply concerning. In 2000, Kraft discovered E. coli bacteria in several samples of Breakstone's cottage cheese from a single day's production. 11,000 cases. had to be recalled nationwide across the Breakstones and Light and Lively product lines. In 2014, Kraft issued one of the largest cottage cheese recalls in American history. Approximately 1.2 million cases of cottage cheese were pulled from shelves after ingredients at the Tar, California manufacturing facility were not stored at proper temperatures. The recall affected products under 4 different brand names, including Breakstones, Canuden, Simply Kraft, and Daily Chef. The FDA confirmed at least one illness was linked to the recalled cottage cheese. The Tar plant had to cease production entirely while the company addressed the problem. Then in 2019, Kraft Heinz recalled 9,500 cases of Breakstone's cottage cheese after consumers found pieces of red plastic and metal in their containers. 6 individual complaints were filed. The contamination was introduced during production, and the affected product had been shipped to retailers across the United States and exported to Latin America. Beyond the recalls, Breakstone's product formulations have drawn criticism from nutrition experts. The brand's Strawberry Cottage Doubles contains 6 grams of added sugar, artificial flavors, and less protein than competing products. The 2% variety includes tapioca starch that pushes carbohydrate content to 7 grams per serving. Registered dietitian Joshua May has specifically called out the Doubles line for its high added sugars and artificial flavors, recommending consumers choose other brands instead. Reports also surfaced that Kraft Heinz was considering selling off the Breakstones brand entirely to help pay down corporate debt, raising questions about how much investment and quality oversight the brand is actually receiving. 3 major recalls in 2 decades, repeated foreign object contamination, a facility shutdown, and a parent company that may be looking to dump the brand. That is the reality behind one of America's most trusted cottage cheese names. The Cornucopia Institute's cottage cheese investigation found that large-scale manufacturers routinely use thickeners, gums, and the inflammatory agent carrageenan to cut costs and extend shelf life, while smaller producers make wholesome cottage cheese with just milk, cream, cultures, and salt. So, what should you look for instead? The answer is simpler than you might think. Look for cottage cheese with the shortest ingredient list possible. The best options contain just cultured milk, cream, and salt. That is it. No gums, no starches, no titanium dioxide, no polyuretate 80. Brands like Daisy and Good Culture have built their reputations on keeping ingredients minimal. Look for cottage cheese with the shortest ingredient list possible. The best options contain just cultured milk, cream, and salt. That is it. No gums, no starches, no titanium dioxide, no polyuretate 80. Brands like Daisy and Good Culture have built their reputations on keeping ingredients minimal. Second, look for products labeled ADRA, B, G, H free or ARC or BST free. This ensures the milk comes from cows not treated with synthetic growth hormones that are banned in the European Union, Canada, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Third, watch the sodium. The USDA cites 348 milligrams as average for a half-cup serving, but some brands pack in well over 450 milligrams. Harvard School of Public Health researchers have specifically warned that cottage cheese is one of those hidden high-sodium foods that catches people off guard. If you have high blood pressure or heart disease, choose low-sodium or no-salt added varieties. The cottage cheese comeback is real, but the brands cashing in on this trend are not all created equal. Some are giving you clean, protein-rich food. Others are giving you a chemistry experiment dressed up in wholesome packaging. Now you know the difference.